Well, welcome to this BC Strategies live event. I'm Kevin Kieller, and I'm joined by Tom Brannen. And I'm super excited, Tom, because we did this augmented reality and virtual reality study earlier in 2023. And today we're going to get a chance to discuss some of the results. So, yeah, we co-authored it. It was, I think we learned a lot of things. And so I'm excited to share it with the audience today.
Yeah, me too. There's a lot of opinions about AR and VR,
Right.
and not a whole lot of hard data out there. And certainly, I'm guilty as anyone at voicing my opinions on the subject. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to think through the questions of what we wanted to ask. What did we want to, learn from the business community about their adoption? What are they doing? What are they not doing? Why are they not doing more? What are the things that they're having success with? These are all things that we really wanted to dig into and kind of get some hard data behind it. And that's what we did.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point because you're 100% right. BC Strategies, where there's a group of independent analysts and consultants, and there is no lack of opinions from the analysts or the consultants. But, sometimes, I mean, they're well reasoned, but, they could be based on a sample size of one. And so this is super exciting to get some, kind of hard data from this. So let's take a look. Just, I think, the study purpose, right? Really, we did, as you said, we wanted to better understand what currently people were doing and also, what their plans were in terms of adopting virtual and augmented reality. We'll call it now VR and AR going forward. And what use cases they were looking at, did they have, their successes and failures. The survey was sent out to just hundreds of organizations. And we got a pretty good split, right? So we had like 1/3 were these like bigger than 5,000, so large organizations. 1/3 were kind of small organizations, which was like less than 10 employees. And then the remaining third, kind of fell between those particular extremes, right?
Yep.
So I think we were happy with that distribution.
Yeah, I mean, and it certainly turned out really well in that regard, and it gives us that good kind of snapshot in time of where were things in 2023, and I think it'll be real interesting to follow up in the future and kind of look back on this kind of snapshot of time to see what changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we wanted before we dive into some of the results, we just kind of cherry picked some of what we thought would be the most relevant results in the actual kind of study. There's a lot more kind of data and graphs, et cetera. But we really wanted to shout out to, we got support from a whole bunch of people, but certainly Zoom really stepped up and was the primary sponsor for this particular study survey that BC Strategies conducted. So thank you very much to Zoom for your assistance and support in making this happen. Okay,
Absolutely.
so let's take a look. So here so this was, we asked some questions about AR and VR adoption. Tom, thoughts on, why don't you walk us through what this is telling us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, we did want to separate AR and VR because they are very different. They get grouped together. We certainly grouped them together for this survey, but they're inherently very different technologies with different use cases, and it's certainly getting kind of blurred as we move forward. But the applications are very, very different. So we wanted to separate them out, and as we looked at adoption, we wanted to kind of compare and contrast the differences between AR and VR. And kind of what we found was when we talk about AR devices, they're generally more expensive.
Right.
At the time of the survey, the HoloLens is like $3,500 or more. It's a little bit more complex. There's less kind of off the shelf. Go to the app store, download the app, and you're up and running. It's more customization. So I'm kind of not surprised to see, that a large percentage of our survey respondents aren't using AR just because it's more complicated. Now, the interesting thing about that, Kevin, is that generally businesses kind of understand AR a little bit better, and they kind of understand the use cases better. So I was a little bit surprised to see this disparity between the use of AR and VR. And we can see on the VR side that adoption is much higher with our survey, the folks that did the survey. And again, devices are a little bit less expensive. There's more kind of off-the-shelf applications for them to implement, much easier to implement. So while there's a little bit less of an understanding of the value of VR, it actually is being adopted more according to the survey.
Yeah, no, those are great points, and the thing that a couple things I just want to point out here is probably the people that responded to the AR VR survey were probably self-selecting for people that are using it more. So it's like I think probably the 56% in VR might not be like businesses in general, because people that said, "Oh, I don't even know what AR VR is," they probably didn't complete the survey. But I also, yeah, to your point, I'm surprised because certainly, Microsoft with HoloLens for years has been showing off use cases like the with Teams and the remote expert, and they were just showing that off. So I'm sort of surprised that in business, $3,500 is a lot, but for some of these larger organizations, if you don't have to fly a mechanic across the country to fix a jet engine, I think that was one of the use cases that they showed up. I mean, that's not much to a big multinational, right? So I was a little bit, kind of surprised with that as well. So let's take a look. And then, so the people aren't using, we were interested in, okay, well, so what are the, the particular, obstacles? I'll talk to, kind of the lion's share, which is ending up being 39% in both cases. So this isn't surprising to me. The biggest impediment was they haven't identified a use case, which of course, so they can't make a business case for it. Now, that being said, I think just the experimentation, like that's the whole idea, right? These technologies, whether it's AI right now or, and you do need to kind of experiment with some of these things. So there you go. I talked about the biggest wedge. Anything jump out for you, Tom, in terms of, surprising or you want to draw attention to?
Well, I think, I don't think it is very surprising that seems to still be the biggest barrier
Right.
folks have. And I think to kind of just double click on that a little bit, there's is it because the use cases don't exist, or is it just that they're not aware of them? And I think, we're still in the very early stages of understanding the use cases. But certainly for a lot of organizations, I mean, you talked about the kind of a remote tech when we talk about AR. To me, that's kind of a no-brainer use case. Like,
Right.
So I think it's a little bit a matter of getting people's heads wrapped around what's possible with this technology. So I think the use cases are there, and we're getting more and more every day. But it's just that awareness of how this stuff works and how it can be leveraged, and then the ROI that comes along with that. So I think that just proves that the industry has a lot of work to do to kind of expand people's imaginations about what's possible, because there's some amazing stuff that these technologies can do. So that to me was kind of interesting. I think we see cost as kind of a larger element for augmented reality, which again, not
Right.
surprising given that it's more expensive. But cost is not really a big factor, especially with VR. It was less than 10%. So even at $500 or $1,000 a headset, it doesn't seem like that's the big issue. It does seem to be more of that, establishing a use case, and then we see kind of that priority. Maybe they've identified a use case, but they have other higher priorities that they're working on. So that was kind of interesting to me. Technical complexities does show up,
Yeah.
and because it is a little bit different for these organizations. And then there's the challenge of managing these devices as well, that kind of feeds into some of the reasons why they're not doing that, as we saw in the comments. So yeah, I mean, I think it's purely a kind of a vision thing at this
Yeah.
point, of folks just understanding what this stuff can do.
Yeah, and the great analysis there. I mean, I think kind of like for me, like not having a use case kind of drives the not a top priority, right? Because if I don't know how I'm going to do this, and then the cost piece. I mean, the cost is, to your point on the AR side, it's immaterial if there's the return on the investment, right? So if it costs $3,500 and it saves you $3,500 a month, then it's like a no-brainer, right? But obviously, if you don't know how to use it, then you're not going to get the return. But the interesting thing is, so the people that are experimenting with it, overall, I'm going to say for VR for sure, and for AR to a lesser degree, they're having success. So if you look on the right-hand side, we asked, okay, so if you're using VR, how successful has it been? And so you really have, and that's the percentage for some reason. So there's 20% that was very successful and 50% that was successful. So, 2/3, 70% of the people had success using, VR. I mean, some people were 4% really screwed up, I guess, very unsuccessful. But the vast majority, were quite successful. In the AR space, where, as we've talked about, the use cases have been better messaged, at least by the vendors, it only, added up to what, 47%, 35 plus 12. Yeah, 47%. So just, kind of less than half. And there's a whole bunch of people, 41%, maybe, I don't know, maybe they're still when we surveyed them, maybe they're still in flight or something because they just didn't know if it was successful or not. But you think that if you're going to do some of these pilots, and, in these organizations, we did ask questions. We don't have it in, kind of today in this deck, but, most of them, they're small deployments, right? So in the pilot stage, you'd think you'd come up with some criteria, because if you're doing these pilots or these small deployments, you really would want to kind of know if if it was successful or not. But anything jump out here? I mean, I was pleasantly surprised that the success rate was high.
Yeah, I think you kind of pointed it out there on the VR side. That's very successful. Only 3% were unsuccessful. I mean, so that's pretty huge.
Yeah.
I think for the AR side, I think it shows a little bit less success. And I think that it's kind of due to the maturity of the hardware. Like, we're still dealing with relatively immature hardware. The most of the AR headsets are limited in things like their battery life. Their resolution's still not great. The one of the big ones is the field of view of what you can see in there is relatively small still. So we kind of have these technical limitations that I think are holding back AR a little bit, and and they're contributing to maybe a little bit of that being not quite as successful, even though the use case is there, even though the technology is pretty cool. Like the deployment of it, or where we're at today, is just not quite, I think, where it needs to be to really see more success with AR.
But I guess the key takeaway is, for people, if you're trying it, this is probably a great time to be trying some of these technologies, because they're only going to improve over time. And the people that are trying them seem to be learning good things and also having a fair amount of success. So, and then we asked, kind of, okay, so some people are, having success, like, where are they focusing, both from an AR and VR use cases? What do they plan to focus on in the future? So why don't you take the lead on kind of walking through what jumped out on this data?
Well, I think on the AR side, I think seeing the training as being a huge area. I mean, that's been an area where they've been having success. So seeing kind of a future focus on that. Seeing collaboration that high on the AR side is a little surprising to me, because we don't necessarily we think of VR in terms of collaboration, but there's still some very interesting use cases around AR collaboration as well. I think on the VR side, the one thing that really stood out was the team building segment there, 21%.
Right.
This is not that surprising, and that's been one of the areas of success that a lot of companies have had, particularly in a hybrid world or a remote work world where your workforce is distributed all over the world. The challenge of how to get people integrated into the team. How do we build some rapport? How do we kind of strengthen the relationships, particularly of new hires, and help them feel at home? Doing a virtual happy hour on video meeting platform may not be enough. And so
Right.
it makes sense that people are starting to look into this, but to see that this is really taken on, I thought was particularly interesting in these results.
Yeah, like you. I was surprised that collaboration on the AR side because the remote expert assistance, like that, seems to be a bit of a slam dunk in terms of when you do some return on investment. I mean, education and training, I think, kind of are pretty much one and the same. And the thing about AR is, the difference is you're actually seeing. So if you're, I don't know, repairing an engine or the jet plane, or you get to actually see the thing, and then it is augmented reality. It can say, here's the steps, and it can walk you through things. I remember with the HoloLens, there was like a fake manufacturing plant that Microsoft set up, and I went in, and it's kind of like, I got to try that out, and it's like, okay, you're the manager of the plant, and as soon as it starts, like everything starts breaking down, and then you were able to go over to the machine, and somebody remotely was able to effectively draw in front of your face and say, yeah, remove this wire and replace this, and so I think that that works. I don't really actually understand the collaboration piece. I understand it from a VR perspective because, as you and I have talked about, there's something unique in VR about not only being in the same meeting, but being in the same place, whether it's like everybody appears that they're on the top of a mountain or on the moon. It is a shared experience, which I think then ties into that team building aspect that you talked about. The other thing, I mean, yeah.
I was going to say one area of collaboration that we're already seeing though is like prototyping in AR. So you could have multiple people in the same room together,
Right.
that are all sharing and manipulating a virtual asset. So they're seeing each other, they're seeing the table, but they're seeing maybe it's a architect's plans or a model of
Right.
something they're building, and they can actually make changes in real time and see those updated. So that kind of collaboration, definitely is very interesting. And like automotive companies are loving this because in the past they used to have to ship out, have 3D print models and ship them to
Right.
locations around the world. With this AR stuff, they can do that so much easier. So I think that side of collaboration, it's a little bit harder to understand, but it's already happening. So I guess,
Right.
but yeah, still surprised that it's that high.
Yeah. Yeah, because everything you say, like I always think that use case might lend itself better to VR. The same thing, right? Now we're collaborating, we're designing a car or whatever, but I guess with AR, I get to see you across the table,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
but so maybe there's value in that. The soft skills training was interesting to me in the VR space. I mean, I know more in the clinical setting, they've used VR to do some aversion therapy. So if you're afraid of heights or afraid of spiders or whatever it is, you can simulate that and get the similar reaction. And I've done some VR games where you've had to walk across this tiny, kind of beam, and it looks like it's above a canyon that's like super deep. And I'll tell you, I'm generally not afraid of heights, but man, that triggered me. Like I had to walk across and repeat like out loud to myself, like, this isn't real, this isn't real. So I don't know. Have you seen like the soft skills training? That was the one that surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, there's two things that VR does really well in this regard. One is to kind of create an emotional connection,
Right.
so that you're not just watching a video about something. Maybe you're able to experience it. So if it's, let's say it's in-person customer service training, well, they can run these simulations at you where you really feel like that person's on the other side of
Right.
the table from you. So you're going to get a little amped up, you're going to get a little emotional, and so they're able to kind of push some of those buttons. And I think as we think of things outside of, there's the soft skills training, and then there's also things that we've tried, thought of as kind of compliance training,
Right.
whether it's diversity training or harassment training or whatever. There's so much more you can do and so much deeper you can go to have people experience and maybe feel a little bit what it's like to be on the other end of that. And,
Yeah.
and so VR kind of kind of allows you to do that. And the second thing about it is it allows you to make a mistake. So if you make a mistake in one of these training classes, it's okay, and people learn by making mistakes.
Right.
So being able to make it more emotional, allow them to make mistakes, help them to learn from it, is why the studies are showing that when it comes to training, that VR can be better than even in-class training because of what
Right.
you're able to, the environment you're able to build, and the emotional buttons you're able to kind of push as part of that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, and then we asked, so that was some of kind of the hard data. So that was great. That was, then there was a number of open-ended questions, and we got a lot of different responses. I mean, here we're just kind of summarizing, some of the key themes that kind of came out. So from an AR perspective, we asked, what were some of the obstacles, and some of the things we've mentioned already. People talked about it being very new tech. So, and there was a lot of feedback saying that, and this makes a lot of sense, that trials and experimentation are necessary, right? So, and that totally makes sense because they don't know what use case, so you got to try these things out. And overall, the lessons learned was, which just kind of ties into this thing, that they need to find and communicate a beneficial use case, because obviously nobody's going to fund this at scale unless you can actually do that. So why don't you talk about some of the kind of key themes from the VR side?
I think, we did see a lot of just simple things about user comfort, making the devices lighter and more comfortable for people to wear
Right.
for longer and then, most people can only go about an hour before it starts putting pressure on their forehead or their nose. There was things too about kind of in a shared training environment, how hygienic are the
Yes.
devices, how easily can they be cleaned, these kind of relatively mundane things that people don't really want to talk about, but yet they absolutely affect the ability for organizations to deploy these things. So there was a lot of, you could tell a lot of real world concerns about
Right.
These particular types of things, and even limiting session length and trying not to set expectations where people have to wear these for long periods of time.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing, because I think people misunderstand sometimes. Like, they think, as opposed to just using, the video, that this is going to be like somehow you walk in and you're going to, for 8 hours a day, wear these. And I think, the right thing, and this limit the session length, but I think where there's success is people recognizing this is another tool in your toolbox. It's not, you don't need to do this for every meeting, but there are specific meetings. You talked about prototyping or the team building, or there's certainly different things, walkthroughs if you're designing things, where you might spend the hour in it. And right now with the devices you talked about as well, that's kind of aligned with some of the battery life as well. And in general, people, like the respondents, did appreciate that they're in early days, and and I think the organizations that were experimenting with AR and VR realized that they had to do this to figure out what's going to work and provide value to their particular organization. So I wanted to ask you, I think that's, if you wanted to reach out to either Tom or I, there's kind of our email addresses, or you could, of course, reach out on LinkedIn. But I wanted to ask you, so this, we did this in 2023. It's a great kind of data-driven snapshot in time. What do you expect to see, Tom, into 2024? Is there going to be any major changes, or what's your predictions?
Trying to predict this space is a very dangerous thing, but I'll give it a shot. I think we'll see kind of modest growth going into 2024. We're kind of seeing that we'll see the Apple Vision Pro get released early part of next year, but it's a
Right.
$3,500 device, so it's not going to be a mass adopted device, but it will set the stage for Apple's strategy going forward. And I think it's going to be a developer device, so I think we'll see a lot of development and then hopefully at some point, maybe towards the end of next year, we'll start to see announcements of a more consumer device that could kind of give us that iPhone moment that those of us in the space have kind of been waiting for. I do think one of the big moves, though, is going to be in business use, because of Meta's development of Microsoft, in partnership with Microsoft. So, and I just wrote about this on No Jitter if you want to check out the article. But I think that's going to be a big driver. I think that, remember the VR slide about collaboration? I think it was around 25% of people that were expecting to use VR for collaboration. I think that part of the pie grows significantly in the next 12 to 24 months, particularly as Microsoft Teams with Mesh starts to move into this space. Mesh is their virtual reality event platform, for lack of a better word. And I think where I see that setting up, Kevin, is like, your meetings will still be in Teams, but anything that's considered kind of an event will move, into Mesh. And you can join via Teams. You can join via your Teams client, or you can download an app to be a little bit more interactive, or you can go full-blown VR. So I think it'll be kind of a gateway that will massively expand collaboration and remove the friction around kind of collaborating in VR, and allow the masses, if you will, all Teams users to potentially participate in VR events. I think that's going to be a huge, significant driver, as well as kind of the Office apps come into VR, where you could travel with your headset and not have to travel with a laptop, and access all of your spreadsheets and Word docs and have them, in multiple screens, in front of you on the plane, in the hotel, or wherever you go. So I think we're kind of seeing some real kind of red meat VR applications coming forward, as opposed to kind of just the more esoteric experiences that we've had so far. And I think that's going to be a huge driver for business adoption.
Yeah. No, I think, like you, I think it'll be interesting to see how this Apple Vision Pro, gets adopted. But at that price point, I also agree it's going to start probably in, some business application that people can find. But I think if you're thinking about this, and, I thought this at Microsoft Ignite when they were talking about Mesh with Teams, a lot of people go, well, why would I, I don't want to spend all my time with, being a legless person inside this VR space. But once again, if you're thinking about this, it's not for all your meetings. Some meetings are fantastic. Some meetings don't need to be meetings, and an email suffices. Some meetings could just be audio. Some meetings, video. Occasionally, you could use a whiteboard, although I rarely see that. But, and then there will be some meetings that can be in AR or VR, and it's really going to make a difference in terms of productivity once the tools and the devices and the use cases get worked out. So thanks, Tom, for co-authoring the study with me. Thanks for, kind of going through, these kind of high-level results. And, as I said, you can contact us on LinkedIn. BC Strategies does these kind of bespoke, surveys and studies. I know Blair Pleasant and I did one a couple of years back on training and user adoption. So, and we can do that kind of from this independent third-party perspective. This was certainly very interesting. And, if you have any further questions, or if there's other specific questions that we didn't cover, we've got a lot more data kind of from the study and the survey. Any final parting comments, Tom?
Yeah, just thank you, Kevin, for partnering with me on this. There's no way I could have done something like this by myself, which
this is true collaboration, right?
It is a true collaboration, and it just is a great testament to the value of BC Strategies in the community, that we can do projects like that are bigger than just one person. So thank you so much for allowing me to work with you on this, and it was a blast. I learned a lot, and certainly we got some great data out of this.
Well, that's the live event for today. Thank you for joining, and until next time, stay safe and have a good rest of your day.
Adios.
Oh, nice balloons.